The millionaire's pregnant wife wouldn't stop crying in pain until a poor 8-year-old girl showed what was wrong, leaving everyone emotional. Before we start, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Like and subscribe for more emotional stories. Olivia Parker clutched her swollen belly, tears streaming down her face as another wave of pain crashed through her body. The sunny afternoon in Central Park should have been perfect. Blue skies, gentle breeze, children's laughter floating from the nearby playground. Instead, she sat hunched on a wooden bench outside a small refreshment kiosk, trying desperately not to scream. "Breathe, honey. Just breathe," Thomas whispered, his designer watch glinting in the sunlight as he rubbed her back. Despite his wealth and power as CEO of Parker Technologies, he felt utterly helpless. The fear in his eyes matched the panic rising in her chest. "Something's wrong, Thomas. It shouldn't hurt like this," Olivia gasped between sobs. At 5 months pregnant, she'd been experiencing what her doctor called normal discomfort. But this was different, sharp, insistent, terrifying. Onlookers stared, some with concern, others with the morbid curiosity reserved for public spectacles. A park attendant approached with a bottle of water, his face a mask of awkward sympathy. "Should I call an ambulance, sir?" he asked Thomas, who nodded frantically while fumbling with his phone. That's when the crowd parted. A small figure stepped forward, a little girl, no more than 8 years old, wearing a faded blue dress with patches at the elbows. Her sneakers were worn thin, but her eyes held a wisdom far beyond her years. "She needs help," the girl stated simply. Not a question, but a declaration. Thomas stepped between them. "My wife needs medical attention." "The ambulance is—" "Your babies are talking to each other," the girl interrupted, looking directly at Olivia's belly. The kiosk fell silent. "Excuse me?" Thomas's voice cracked. The girl's name was Emma, though no one had asked. She approached Olivia with the confidence of someone much older. "My grandma was a midwife back in West Virginia. She taught me things." Before anyone could stop her, Emma knelt before Olivia. "May I?" she asked, and something in her voice made Olivia nod through her tears. Emma placed her small hands on Olivia's stomach, closed her eyes, and remained perfectly still for several seconds. Then she reached into her threadbare backpack and pulled out a small flashlight, the kind sold at dollar stores, with a plastic casing decorated with cartoon characters. "They need light and a song," Emma explained, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. She switched on the flashlight, placed it gently against the curve of Olivia's belly, and began to hum a lullaby, soft, sweet, and somehow ancient. To everyone's astonishment, Olivia's breathing slowly steadied. The tension in her face eased. Emma continued humming while moving the light in slow circles. "There's not just one," Emma whispered after a moment. "There are 3 babies inside. They're crowded and scared." Thomas laughed nervously. "That's impossible. The ultrasound only showed—" "3, Emma insisted, looking up at him with unnerving certainty. "2 were hiding behind the first one. They need more room to grow." The park had become impossibly quiet, as if the whole world was holding its breath. Even the distant traffic seemed muted. "Triplets," Olivia whispered, her hands joining Emma's on her stomach. Emma nodded, continuing her gentle circular massage with the flashlight. "They're better now. They understand." As if on cue, Olivia felt a strange, fluttering sensation, not pain, but movement. 3 distinct patterns of movement. Thomas sank to his knees beside them, his face pale. "How could you possibly know?" "I just do," Emma replied with a shrug, still humming between sentences. "My grandma could feel babies too. She said some people just can." Her small fingers traced patterns on Olivia's belly with surprising expertise. "Your babies are special. They need special care." Tears welled in Olivia's eyes again, but different tears now. tears of wonder rather than pain. Thomas pulled out his phone again, this time not for an ambulance, but to call their doctor. And as the summer sun filtered through the oak leaves above them, casting dappled shadows across this unlikely scene, something shifted in the universe. Lives once separate were now intertwined by a child's knowing touch and the miracle of 3 heartbeats where they'd thought there was only one. No one noticed the thin, worried-looking woman watching from the edge of the gathering crowd, Emma's mother, Rebecca, counting the minutes until her daughter returned with the water she'd been sent to fetch from the kiosk nearly 20 minutes ago. Doctor. Natalie Simmons stared at the ultrasound monitor, her professional composure momentarily abandoned. "Well, I'll be damned," she whispered, then quickly recovered. "Excuse my language, but that little girl was right." Thomas and Olivia exchanged stunned glances as the image on the screen confirmed what seemed impossible just hours earlier. 3 distinct shapes pulsed with life, 3 heads, 3 bodies, 3 heartbeats. "Triplets," Dr. Simmons confirmed, moving the wand carefully over Olivia's gel-covered abdomen. 2 of them were positioned directly behind the first, creating what we call a shadowing effect. It happens sometimes with multiples, but it's rare for it to persist through multiple scans. Thomas gripped the edge of the examination table, his knuckles white. "Is this why she's been in pain?" The doctor nodded thoughtfully. "Likely. Multiple pregnancies create more pressure, more movement. The positioning was probably causing discomfort." She peered closer at the monitor, but everything looks healthy, strong heartbeats all around. Olivia lay back, mind reeling. That little girl, Emma, how could she have known? And that massage technique with the flashlight, it actually worked. Dr. Simmons raised an eyebrow. "Folk medicine sometimes contains wisdom we don't fully understand. I'd like to hear more about this technique." She printed several images of the ultrasound. "What matters now is adjusting your care plan. Triplets are high risk by definition." As the doctor outlined the new reality, more frequent appointments, possible bed rest, specialized nutrition, Olivia's thoughts drifted back to the park and the small, confident hands that had somehow known what medical technology had missed. "We need to find her," Olivia said suddenly, interrupting the doctor's explanation about fetal development in multiple pregnancies. Thomas looked at his wife. "Emma?" "Yes?" Olivia sat up, wiping the gel from her stomach. "I don't know how she did it, but she helped when no one else could, and she looked." "Thomas, she was wearing clothes that were practically falling apart." Later that evening, in their penthouse overlooking Manhattan, Thomas made calls to the Central Park administration, but no one could identify the girl or her mother. The park was too busy, with thousands of visitors daily. It was like trying to find a specific drop of water in a flowing river. Olivia couldn't sleep that night. She stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, gazing at the glittering city below, a constellation of lights in the darkness. Somewhere down there was a little girl who had changed their lives in an instant. "We'll find her," Thomas promised, joining her at the window and wrapping his arms around her from behind, his hands cradling her stomach with new awareness of the 3 lives growing within. 3 babies, Thomas. 3. The magnitude hadn't fully registered until now. "Our whole life plan just tripled," he chuckled softly. "Good thing we have the resources to handle it." Olivia turned to face him. "That's just it. We do. But Emma and her mother, they looked like they were struggling." Thomas understood immediately. His wife's compassion was one of the reasons he'd fallen in love with her. "When we find them, we'll help them, whatever they need." Across the city, in a cramped 1-bedroom apartment in Queens, Emma Johnson lay awake on the pull-out couch she shared with her mother, Rebecca. The springs dug into her small back, but that wasn't what kept her from sleeping. "Mom?" she whispered into the darkness. Rebecca stirred beside her. "The lady with the babies in the park today." I think they're looking for us. Rebecca sighed. Emma, I told you, you shouldn't have approached those people. Rich folks don't want poor folks bothering them. But the babies needed help. And now we might lose the cleaning job at the community centre because we were late getting back. Rebecca's voice wasn't angry, just tired. Bone-deep tired. We can't afford any more problems right now. Emma rolled onto her side, facing away from her mother. She didn't say what she was thinking. That the fancy man and lady from the park weren't a problem, but a possibility. A door opening where before there had only been walls. And they'll find us, Emma whispered to herself, too quietly for her mother to hear. The babies want them to. The next morning, Thomas Parker strode into the headquarters of Parker Technologies, his mind far from the usual concerns of stock prices and product launches. The news of triplets had transformed his world overnight. His assistant Michael hurried alongside him, frantically updating him on the day's meetings. The board wants finalized projections for the Smith merger by noon, and legal needs you to sign off on the patent applications before... Cancel everything, Thomas interrupted, stopping abruptly in the middle of the lobby. Michael nearly dropped his tablet. Sir, I need you to do something else today. Thomas pulled out his phone and showed Michael a sketch he'd drawn based on his memory of Emma. Find this girl. Her name is Emma, about 8 years old. She was at the Central Park refreshment kiosk near the Bethesda fountain yesterday around 2 p.m. Michael stared at the rough drawing, then at his boss. May I ask why? She helped my wife when no one else could. And I think she and her mother need help themselves. Thomas's tone left no room for further questions. Contact the park administration, check security cameras, talk to kiosk workers. I don't care what it takes. As Michael hurried off, Thomas entered his corner office and immediately called Olivia. How are you feeling? He asked. Better. Still processing. Olivia's voice was stronger than yesterday. Did you start looking for Emma? Michael's on it. If she's findable, he'll find her. Thomas gazed out at the Manhattan skyline. Dr. Simmons called. She's referring us to the top maternal fetal medicine specialist in the country. Dr. James Chen is flying in from Boston tomorrow. Olivia was silent for a moment. Thomas, do you realize how privileged we are? To snap our fingers and have experts fly across the country for us? Thomas knew that tone. It was Olivia's perspective check, something she'd been good at even before they were wealthy. She'd grown up solidly middle class, while Thomas had been born into money. Her grounding influence was one of the many things he valued about her. I know, he said softly, and I keep thinking about Emma and her mother. The contrast is stark. But I've been researching organizations that support underprivileged children with special abilities or talents, Olivia said. There are some interesting programs, but nothing quite fits what I saw Emma do. In Queens, Emma was having a difficult morning at school. Her teacher had caught her drawing pictures of triplet babies instead of completing her math worksheet. Emma, this is the third time this week you've failed to finish your work, Ms. Bryant said, keeping Emma inside during recess. Is everything okay at home? Emma looked down at her worn sneakers. Yes, ma'am. Your mother mentioned you might be late to the after-school program today. She has a job interview. Emma nodded. Her mother cleaned offices at night, but was trying to find daytime work to be home when Emma returned from school. The constant juggling act was wearing Rebecca down, but she never complained, not out loud anyway. The babies will help us, Emma said suddenly. Ms. Bryant frowned. What babies, Emma? But Emma just smiled and returned to her math. Some things were hard to explain to grown-ups. After school, Emma waited on the community center steps for her mother. Rebecca was late, which wasn't unusual when she had interviews. Emma didn't mind. She liked watching people pass by, imagining their stories. A sleek black car pulled up to the curb, the kind Emma had only seen in movies. The back window rolled down, revealing a familiar face. Emma? Olivia Parker leaned forward, her expression a mixture of relief and disbelief. "It is you." Rebecca arrived at that moment, rushing up the steps, out of breath. She froze at the sight of the luxury car and the well-dressed pregnant woman calling her daughter's name. "Mom!" Emma exclaimed. "This is the lady with the babies." Rebecca's face paled. "I'm sorry if my daughter bothered you yesterday. She sometimes gets carried away with her imagination." Olivia stepped carefully out of the car, one hand supporting her belly. "Your daughter didn't bother me. She helped me when I was in terrible pain. And somehow, she knew I was carrying triplets before any doctor discovered it." Rebecca's eyes widened. "Triplets?" Emma said. She stopped herself, looking uncertainly between her daughter and this wealthy stranger. "Please," Olivia said gently, "we'd like to thank you both properly. Would you join us for dinner?" Rebecca hesitated, pride and practicality at war in her expression. Emma tugged at her mother's sleeve. "The babies want us to go," she whispered insistently, and for reasons Rebecca couldn't fully articulate, even to herself, she found herself nodding. The restaurant Thomas had chosen wasn't what Rebecca expected. Instead of an intimidating five-star establishment with more forks than anyone could possibly need, it was a comfortable family-owned Italian place in Greenwich Village, elegant but unpretentious. "I hope this is all right," Thomas said as they were seated in a private alcove. "Olivia's been craving their gnocchi." Rebecca sat stiffly, acutely aware of her worn blouse and hastily applied makeup. Emma, by contrast, seemed perfectly at ease, beaming at Olivia's belly as if greeting old friends. "How are the babies today?" Emma asked, reaching for her water glass with both hands. Olivia smiled. "Much calmer, thanks to you. The doctors confirmed everything you said. It's truly remarkable." Thomas leaned forward. "Emma, how did you know about the triplets and how to help Olivia?" Rebecca tensed, but Emma answered naturally. "Grandma Rose taught me before she went to heaven. She could feel babies, too. She delivered lots of them back in the mountains." "Your grandmother was a midwife?" Olivia asked. Rebecca nodded reluctantly. "My mother served rural communities in West Virginia for 40 years, areas where hospitals were distant and doctors scarce." She hesitated. She had unusual methods sometimes. "Like the flashlight and humming?" Thomas prompted, "among other things." Rebecca's voice softened with memory. "People came from 3 counties away to have my mother deliver their babies. She had a gift." Her eyes drifted to Emma, and apparently she passed it on. The waiter arrived with appetizers, temporarily pausing the conversation. When he left, Thomas addressed Rebecca directly. "May I ask how you came to New York from West Virginia?" Rebecca took a sip of water, buying time. These weren't easy stories to tell strangers, especially wealthy strangers who lived in a different universe. But something about Olivia's genuine interest and Thomas's respectful tone made her willing to share. "After my husband left 3 years ago, there wasn't much keeping us in Morgantown. I had a cousin here who said jobs were plentiful." She gave a small, humorless laugh. "Turns out, plentiful doesn't always mean livable wage, but we make do." Emma piped up. "Mom cleans offices at night and goes to school during the day." Pride briefly overcame Rebecca's reticence. "I'm studying to become a medical assistant. 2 semesters left." Olivia and Thomas exchanged glances, a silent communication between spouses. "Rebecca," Olivia began carefully, "I know this might sound strange coming from someone you just met, but I believe Emma came into our lives for a reason. The pain I was experiencing, doctors couldn't help. Emma did. And somehow she knew about our triplets when advanced medical technology missed them." Rebecca tensed again. She'd heard this tone before, wealthy people about to offer charity that came with strings attached. "We're managing just fine, Mrs. Parker. Please call me Olivia." She reached across the table, not quite touching Rebecca, but bridging the space between them. What I'm trying to say is that I'll be on bed rest soon. High-risk pregnancy. Multiple complications possible. I could use help. Thomas continued seamlessly. We were already planning to hire a pregnancy companion, someone with knowledge of prenatal care who could be present when I'm at work. Given Emma's unusual abilities and your medical training. Rebecca's eyes widened with understanding. Are you offering me a job? A well-compensated position, Thomas confirmed. And if Emma is comfortable, she would be welcome after school. We have plenty of room. Rebecca felt a complex rush of emotions, relief at the prospect of better income, suspicion about their motives, and something else, something that felt strangely like coming full circle. Mom, Emma whispered, tugging her sleeve, the babies need us. Before Rebecca could respond, Olivia gasped, her hand flying to her stomach. Oh! Everyone froze until Olivia's face broke into a radiant smile. They're moving. All three of them, I think. She looked at Emma. Would you like to feel? Without hesitation, Emma moved to Olivia's side of the table and placed her small hand on the pregnant belly. Her face lit up with wonder. They're saying hello, Emma whispered. And as Rebecca watched her daughter communing with these unborn triplets, something shifted in her heart. Perhaps there were forces at work larger than pride or circumstances, connections formed beyond rational explanation. We'll need to discuss details, Rebecca said finally. Hours, expectations, boundaries. Thomas nodded seriously. Of course. Whatever makes you comfortable. As their dinner arrived, the conversation gradually lightened. By dessert, Emma was regaling them with stories about her school's disastrous science fair, and even Rebecca found herself laughing genuinely for the first time in months. Outside, as they prepared to part ways, the Parkers to their penthouse, the Johnsons to their Queen's apartment, Olivia impulsively hugged Rebecca. "Thank you for considering this," she whispered. Rebecca stiffened briefly before returning the embrace. "I haven't said yes yet." But they both knew she would. The following weeks brought profound changes for both families. Rebecca, after careful consideration and detailed contract negotiations, insisting on fair compensation rather than charity, began working as Olivia's pregnancy companion 3 days after their dinner. Emma, with her school's permission, often spent afternoons in the Parker penthouse. Her intuitive understanding of Olivia's condition proved invaluable during a particularly worrying episode in the 7th month. "The littlest one is scared," Emma had announced one afternoon, placing her hands on Olivia's enormous belly without preamble. "She needs to hear your voice more." Dr. Chen, initially skeptical of Emma's folk medicine, couldn't deny the results. After Emma's intervention, which involved positioning Olivia on her left side, using the flashlight in a specific pattern, and humming a particular melody, the smallest triplet's heart rate stabilized. "Whatever you're doing, keep doing it," he'd admitted grudgingly. "But don't stop any of the medical protocols." Today marked the beginning of Olivia's 8th month, and the penthouse buzzed with activity. The nursery, converted from a home office, had been transformed into a serene space with 3 identical cribs, a state-of-the-art monitoring system, and a rocking chair large enough to accommodate a mother with 3 infants. Rebecca arranged fresh flowers beside Olivia's bed, while Thomas reviewed the delivery plan with Dr. Chen via video call. "Blood pressure's creeping up again," Rebecca noted, checking the automated cuff on Olivia's arm. "Let's try those breathing exercises." Olivia complied, though her face betrayed frustration. "I feel so useless, just lying here while everyone else prepares for the babies." Rebecca smiled. "You're doing the hardest job of all, growing 3 humans simultaneously." From the corner of the room, Emma looked up from her homework. The babies don't think you're useless. They think you're their whole world. Olivia's eyes misted. Emma's matter-of-fact statements about what the triplets were thinking had become a source of comfort over these months, even if no one quite understood how she knew these things. Thomas ended his call and joined them. Dr. Chen wants to schedule the C-section for next week. He's concerned about baby C's growth rate. A shadow crossed Olivia's face. The smallest triplet, a girl they'd taken to calling Rosie after Emma's grandmother, had consistently lagged behind her siblings in development. "Emma?" Olivia asked quietly. "What do you think?" Rebecca started to object. It wasn't fair to put such responsibility on an 8-year-old, but Emma was already approaching the bed. "Rosie says she's ready," Emma confirmed after a moment of silence with her ear pressed to Olivia's belly. "But she wants to be born on Tuesday, not Monday." Thomas and Olivia exchanged glances. It wasn't the first time Emma had been specific about timing, and strangely, things often went more smoothly when they followed her suggestions. "I'll call Dr. Chen back," Thomas decided. As he stepped away, Rebecca sat beside Olivia. "You know, my mother would have loved all this. She always said babies have wisdom we've forgotten." Olivia reached for Rebecca's hand. Their relationship had evolved from employer-employee to genuine friendship over these months. "I wish I could have met her." "She'd have liked you," Rebecca admitted, "though she'd probably have lectured you about relying too much on machines and not enough on intuition." They both laughed, but there was truth in it. The pregnancy had been a curious blend of cutting-edge medical science and the ancient wisdom Emma channeled from her grandmother. Later that evening, after Rebecca and Emma had gone home, Thomas found Olivia in the nursery, running her fingers over the 3 tiny outfits laid out for the homecoming. "Penny for your thoughts?" he asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind. Olivia leaned into him. "I was just thinking about how completely our lives have changed since that day in the park." She turned to face him. "And not just because of the triplets." Thomas nodded, understanding. "Rebecca and Emma, they've become family, Thomas. In ways I never expected." Olivia's voice grew serious. "What happens after the babies are born? Rebecca only agreed to work for us until then." Thomas had been pondering the same question. "I've been thinking about that. Rebecca's nearly finished with her medical assistant program. Parker Technologies has an on-site health clinic that could use someone with her skills and empathy." "And Emma's education?" This had become a particular concern for Olivia, who had recognized the girl's exceptional intelligence and intuition. "There's a good private school near the office. Merit scholarship potential." Olivia smiled. "You've been planning this for a while, haven't you?" Thomas shrugged, a little embarrassed at being so transparent. "They've given us so much. It seems right to offer opportunities in return." In their Queen's apartment, Rebecca sat at their small kitchen table, reviewing her medical terminology flashcards while Emma slept. Her phone buzzed with a text from Olivia. "Everything okay for tomorrow? Car will pick you up at 8. Rebecca typed back, "All set." Emma packed her special flashlight. She set down the phone and looked around their apartment. Cramped but tidy. Nothing like the Parker penthouse, but home nonetheless. In just a few months, her entire worldview had shifted. What began as desperate financial need had evolved into something more profound. Purpose, connection, even friendship across socio-economic divides she'd once thought impenetrable. The future remained uncertain. Thomas had hinted at possibilities beyond the pregnancy, but Rebecca was wary of dependence. Still, for the first time since David left, she felt hopeful. Not just surviving, but potentially thriving. In her sleep, Emma murmured something about babies and Tuesday. Rebecca smiled and returned to her studies, wondering not for the first time what strange twist of fate had led them to that particular kiosk on that particular day in Central Park. Tuesday arrived with a sky the color of pale silk and a gentle autumn breeze. At precisely 7:15 a.m., Olivia felt the first contraction. By 7:20, Thomas had alerted Dr. Chen, who confirmed what Emma had somehow known. The triplets were coming today, ready or not. "It's happening 3 hours before the scheduled C-section," Thomas explained over the phone to Rebecca, who was already dressed and preparing to leave their apartment. "Dr. Chen wants us at the hospital immediately. The car will get you in 20 minutes. Emma, overhearing, hurriedly packed her special flashlight and the small handmade blanket she'd been saving for the babies. "Rosie first, then Michael, then Lily," she announced confidently as they rushed to meet the car. These were the names the Parkers had chosen, names that, coincidentally or not, had family significance for both the Parkers and the Johnsons. At New York Presbyterian Hospital, Olivia was already being prepped for emergency surgery. Her blood pressure had spiked dangerously, and monitors showed signs of fetal distress in the smallest triplet. "We can't wait," Dr. Chen informed Thomas. "The surgical team is assembling now." Thomas paced the hallway, torn between being with his wife and waiting for Rebecca and Emma, whose presence had become a kind of talisman over these months. They arrived just as Olivia was being wheeled toward the operating room, Emma breaking protocol by rushing to her side before nurses could intervene. "Rosie says, 'Don't be scared,'" she whispered, squeezing Olivia's hand. "Grandma Rose is watching over all 3 babies." Tears streamed down Olivia's face as she clutched the child's hand. "Tell her thank you," she whispered back. Dr. Chen appeared, fully scrubbed. "Mr. Parker, we need to proceed. Are you coming in?" Thomas looked helplessly at Rebecca, who nodded reassuringly. "We'll be right here," she promised. "Go be with your wife and children." "Who?" As Thomas disappeared behind the swinging doors, Rebecca guided Emma to the waiting area. "Now we wait and trust the doctors." Emma frowned. The doctors need help with Rosie. Rebecca had learned to take her daughter's intuition seriously. "What kind of help, sweetie?" Without answering, Emma pulled out her flashlight and began tracing the same circular pattern in the air that she'd used on Olivia's belly all those months ago. She hummed softly, eyes closed in concentration. A passing nurse gave them an odd look, but continued down the hall. Rebecca sat beside her daughter, one arm around her thin shoulders, wondering not for the first time about the mysteries of the universe that allowed an 8-year-old to perceive what medical science could not. Inside the operating room, controlled chaos reigned. Dr. Chen worked with swift, precise movements, his team responding to commands with wordless efficiency. "Baby A coming out," he announced as he lifted the first triplet, tiny red-faced Rosie, from Olivia's womb. Instead of the lusty cry everyone expected, there was silence. "Oxygen stats dropping," a nurse reported urgently. "Heart rate irregular." As medical staff rushed the infant to a waiting incubator, Thomas felt the world tilting beneath him. Olivia, semi-conscious under the spinal block, squeezed his hand with surprising strength. Emma said, "Not to be afraid," she murmured. "Rosie will be okay." Dr. Chen was already delivering the second triplet, Michael, bigger than his sister, and immediately announcing his arrival with a robust cry. The third baby, Lily, followed moments later with an equally healthy wail. But everyone's attention remained focused on the smallest triplet, still silent as neonatal specialists worked frantically around her incubator. "Come on, little one," Dr. Chen muttered, uncharacteristically emotional as he joined his colleagues after completing Olivia's surgery. In the waiting room, Emma suddenly stood up. "Rosie needs the light now," she said with absolute conviction. Rebecca hesitated only briefly before approaching the nurse's station. "My daughter has something that might help the smallest triplet," she explained, knowing how irrational it sounded. "She's been working with Mrs. Parker throughout the pregnancy." The nurse started to dismiss her, but a passing pediatrician, Dr. Patel, who had consulted on Olivia's case and witnessed Emma's unusual abilities, overheard. "Let them try," she said abruptly. "We're running out of options in there." Moments later, Emma stood beside Rosie's incubator, her small face solemn as she shone her dollar store flashlight in the specific pattern that had worked so many times before. She hummed softly, a lullaby as old as the mountains. Medical staff watched with a mixture of skepticism and desperate hope as monitors continued to show worrying vital signs. Dr. Chen observed from a distance, lips pressed into a tight line of professional disapproval. Then something changed. A soft sound, not quite a cry, more like a questioning whimper, came from the tiny infant. Monitors began showing improved oxygen levels. A minute later, Rosie Parker took a deep, shuddering breath and let out a proper newborn cry. "I'll be damned," Dr. Chen whispered. Emma smiled, tucking her flashlight away. "Grandma Rose says you're welcome." Hours later, when all three babies had been stabilized and Olivia was resting comfortably, Thomas found Rebecca and Emma in the hospital cafeteria. "They're all going to be fine," he announced, voice cracking with emotion. "Even Rosie. The doctors are calling it unexpected," Rebecca smiled, "but not miraculous." Medical professionals tend to avoid that word. Thomas sat heavily, exhaustion and joy competing on his face. "But between us," Emma looked up from her pudding cup, "the babies want to go home soon." Thomas laughed, a release of tension. "One step at a time, Emma." As they sat together, the millionaire CEO, the struggling single mother, and the extraordinary child who had brought them together, something crystallized in the hospital's fluorescent light. Family wasn't always defined by blood or circumstance. Sometimes it was formed in moments of crisis and connection across boundaries of class and convention. "Rebecca," Thomas began hesitantly, "Olivia and I have been talking. After you finish your program, we'd like to offer you a position at Parker Technologies. Our employee health center needs someone with your skills and perspective." Rebecca's eyes widened. "That's very generous, but it's not charity," Thomas insisted. "It's recognition of value. You and Emma have become part of our lives in ways we never expected. We'd like that to continue if you're willing." Emma, seemingly occupied with her dessert, spoke without looking up. "We should say yes, Mom. The babies want us to stay near them." Rebecca laughed softly. "Well, if the babies insist." And in that moment, as autumn sunlight slanted through cafeteria windows and three newborns slept peacefully in the neonatal unit upstairs, a new kind of family was born, one that transcended the conventional boundaries of blood and background. United by the miracle of three tiny lives and the inexplicable wisdom of a child with a plastic flashlight. 1 month after their dramatic birth, the Parker triplets were finally heading home. The hospital room buzzed with activity as nurses reviewed care instructions with Thomas and Olivia, while Rebecca organized the mountain of supplies needed for 3 newborns. "Remember, Mrs. Parker, Rosie still needs monitoring for breathing issues," the head nurse explained, demonstrating the portable monitor, "and all 3 need to be fed every 3 hours, even overnight." Olivia nodded, her face a mixture of excitement and terror. The responsibility of caring for 3 fragile infants felt overwhelming, despite the army of help Thomas had assembled, a night nurse, a day nurse, and Rebecca, whose role had evolved far beyond pregnancy companion to something like family. Emma sat in the corner, seemingly absorbed in a book, but actually watching the triplets in their matching carriers. Her connection with them remained inexplicable, but undeniable. Hospital staff had stopped questioning her uncanny ability to know which baby would cry next, or which one needed a position adjustment. "They're excited to see their room," Emma announced, closing her book, "especially Michael." Thomas smiled at the girl who had become an unexpected blessing in their lives. Well, we shouldn't keep them waiting then. The journey home involved a careful procession. Thomas carrying Lily, Olivia with Michael, and Rebecca holding tiny Rosie, while Emma walked alongside them with solemn importance, carrying a bag of special items she insisted the babies needed. The Parker penthouse had been transformed. Beyond the nursery, evidence of infants appeared everywhere, bottles sterilizing in the kitchen, a changing station in the living room, and 3 swings lined up before the windows overlooking Central Park. "Welcome home, little ones," Olivia whispered as they crossed the threshold. The first night was chaos, despite all preparations. Michael refused to sleep unless held. Lily developed hiccups that nothing seemed to cure, and Rosie's monitor alarmed twice, sending everyone into panic before they realized it was just a loose sensor. By dawn, all 4 adults were exhausted. Emma alone seemed energized, moving between the 3 cribs, humming her grandmother's songs. "This one for Michael," she explained, using her flashlight in a circular pattern. "This one for Lily," she continued with a different motion. "And this special one for Rosie," she finished with the most elaborate sequence. Remarkably, all 3 infants settled almost immediately. "I don't know whether to be amazed or terrified by what she can do," Thomas whispered to Rebecca as they watched from the doorway. Rebecca sighed. "I've stopped questioning it. My mother always said some gifts shouldn't be examined too closely, just appreciated." As sunlight filtered through the nursery blinds, casting golden stripes across the sleeping infants, Olivia joined them in the doorway, leaning heavily on Thomas's arm. "We're going to need a bigger place," she murmured, watching Emma take up position in the rocking chair between the cribs, small guardian to the 3 sleeping babies. "Somewhere with room for all of us." Rebecca started to object. The line between employment and family was already blurring dangerously, but Thomas nodded as if the decision had already been made. "I've been thinking the same thing," he admitted. "A brownstone, maybe, with separate living spaces but room for everyone." For Rebecca, whose entire adult life had been defined by struggle and scarcity, the casual way the Parkers discussed such major changes was still jarring. But watching her daughter with these infants who seemed cosmically connected to her, she found herself considering possibilities that once would have seemed unthinkable. "We should talk about this when we've all had some sleep," she suggested diplomatically. But Emma, overhearing, as she always seemed to, looked up from her vigil with the certainty that continued to surprise them all. "We're already family," she said simply. "The babies know it even if the grown-ups are still figuring it out." And as the first full day at home began, with all its chaotic feedings, diaper changes, and moments of overwhelming love, no one could find reason to argue with her assessment. 3 months passed in a sleep-deprived blur, as the Parker household settled into routines shaped around the triplets' needs. Winter descended on New York, transforming the city into a wonderland of lights and snow that the babies observed with increasing awareness from the warmth of their home. Today marked a special milestone as Rebecca stood before her classmates at the City College of New York, accepting her medical assistant certification with honors. From the audience, Emma beamed with pride, while Thomas bounced Lily on his knee. Olivia sat between them, cradling Michael and Rosie with the practiced ease of a mother who had quickly learned to do everything one-handed. "Rebecca Johnson," the program director announced, "graduating with highest distinction." As applause filled the auditorium, Rebecca felt a surge of emotion. 2 years ago, this moment had seemed impossible, a distant dream pursued in stolen hours between cleaning jobs and parenting responsibilities. Now, against all odds, here she stood. After the ceremony, they gathered at Rebecca and Emma's apartment for a small celebration. The contrast between the Parkers' penthouse and the Johnsons' modest Queen's home remained stark, But Thomas and Olivia moved through the space with genuine comfort, having become regular visitors over the past months. "I have something for you," Thomas said, handing Rebecca an envelope once the cake had been served. "Consider it a graduation gift." Rebecca opened it cautiously, then froze. Inside was an employment contract with Parker Technologies, not for the health center position they'd discussed, but for something called Family Wellness Coordinator, with a salary that made her eyes widen. "This is too much," she protested. Olivia shifted Michael to her other arm. "It's market rate for someone with your qualifications and additional, unique experience." "We're creating the position for you," Thomas explained, "overseeing health and wellness programs for employees and their families. Your perspective on holistic care, combining medical knowledge with the intuitive wisdom you and Emma bring, is exactly what we need." Rebecca fingered the contract, torn between gratitude and pride. "I don't want charity." "It's not charity," Olivia insisted. "It's recognition of value. The same words Thomas used in the hospital, remember? These 3 months have shown us how essential you and Emma are, not just to the triplets, but to reshaping how Parker Technologies approaches employee well-being." Emma, who had been quietly playing with Rosie on a blanket, looked up. "Mom, remember what Grandma Rose always said, when the universe opens a door, you don't question which way it swings," Rebecca finished softly. It was one of her mother's favorite sayings, though she'd spent years doubting its wisdom. Later, after the Parkers had returned home with the triplets, Rebecca sat on Emma's bed for their nightly ritual of stories and reflection. "Big changes coming," she said, stroking her daughter's hair. Emma nodded solemnly. "The babies need us nearby, especially Rosie." Rebecca had learned to trust these pronouncements. "Are you happy, Emmy, with all of this? The Parkers, the babies, spending so much time away from our home?" Emma considered the question with the seriousness she brought to everything. "I like having 2 families," she said finally. "And I like helping the babies grow. It feels like what I'm supposed to do." Rebecca kissed her forehead, marveling at the wisdom in her 9-year-old's eyes. "Then I suppose we're on the right path." As Emma drifted to sleep, Rebecca returned to the kitchen table where the contract waited. The Parkers had also mentioned a brownstone in Brooklyn, with 2 separate apartments, one for them and the triplets, one for Rebecca and Emma, but connected by a shared garden. "For practicality," Thomas had explained, though they all recognized it was about forming a new kind of family structure. Rebecca traced her mother's name, Rose, on a photo beside her. "What do you think, Mom? Is this the door you always said would open?" Outside, snow began falling on New York City, covering its sharp edges and harsh contrasts with a blanket of white that made everything, even the wildly different worlds of the Parkers and Johnsons, seem part of the same beautiful landscape. Spring arrived with cherry blossoms in Central Park and milestones in the brownstone that had become home to both families. The triplets, now 8 months old, were developing distinct personalities. Michael, bold and determined, already crawling. Lily, observant and social, babbling constant conversations. And Rosie, quieter than her siblings, but with a focus that seemed beyond her years, especially when Emma was near. Today, Olivia was meeting with the renovation team for Parker Technologies' new family center. Her vision brought to life with Thomas's resources and Rebecca's expertise. The center would provide childcare, health services, and support for employees' families, with special programming for children with unique needs or abilities. "We should definitely incorporate sensory-friendly spaces," Rebecca suggested, reviewing the plans. She'd grown confidently into her role as Family Wellness Coordinator, bringing perspectives that the corporate world often overlooked. Emma was upstairs with the triplets and their nanny, Maria. At 9 years old, Emma had become something like an older sister to the babies, attending a prestigious private school nearby, but spending afternoons in what everyone called the big house, the larger portion of the brownstone occupied by the Parkers. The doorbell interrupted their meeting. Thomas entered with Dr. Chen, who had become a friend, as well as the triplets' pediatrician. "Sorry to drop by unannounced," Dr. Chen said, "but I wanted to discuss Rosie's latest results personally." Olivia tensed. Despite thriving beyond initial expectations, Rosie remained smaller than her siblings, with persistent respiratory concerns that required monitoring. "Is something wrong?" Olivia asked. Dr. Chen placed a file on the table. "Her latest scans show some concerning developments in her lung tissue. Nothing emergency level yet, but I'd like to schedule additional tests and possibly begin a new treatment protocol." Thomas sat beside Olivia, taking her hand. "What exactly are we looking at, long-term?" "Possibly chronic lung disease," Dr. Chen admitted, "but with proper management, there's no reason she can't live a full, normal life." The adults were so engrossed in medical discussions that no one noticed Emma standing in the doorway, eyes wide with concern, until she spoke. "Rosie knows something's wrong," she said quietly. "She's been trying to tell me." Dr. Chen had long since stopped dismissing Emma's insights. "What does she tell you, Emma?" "That she needs the mountain song, the one for making breathing easy." Rebecca's head snapped up. "My mother's breathing remedy? For the Johnson baby with pneumonia?" Emma nodded solemnly. "I thought that was just a story," Rebecca murmured, but her expression suggested otherwise. That evening, while Dr. Chen observed with professional curiosity, Rebecca and Emma performed what could only be described as a ritual. Dried herbs were steeped in hot water, creating steam that filled Rosie's nursery. Emma used her flashlight, still the same dollar store model, though Thomas had offered to buy her a better one, in patterns, while Rebecca sang a melody so old its origins were lost to time. Little Rosie, who had been fussier than usual all day, gradually relaxed, her breathing becoming deeper and more regular. "I can't explain the physiological mechanism," Dr. Chen admitted afterward, "but her oxygen saturation has improved. Whatever you're doing, it seems to help." 3 days later, new scans showed significant improvement in Rosie's lungs. Not complete healing, but progress that defied medical expectations. "Sometimes science doesn't have all the answers," Dr. Chen told Thomas privately. "Your daughter is benefiting from something that goes beyond our current understanding. I'd advise you to continue both traditional treatment and whatever this is." That night, after all 3 babies were asleep, the adults gathered in the garden that connected the 2 households, a symbolic space that belonged fully to neither family but existed as shared territory. "I've been thinking," Thomas began, uncharacteristically hesitant. "We should document this, Emma's abilities, the techniques, all of it. Not for public consumption, but as a record, for the children when they're older." Rebecca stiffened slightly. "Emma's not a medical curiosity, Thomas." "Of course not," Olivia interjected. "But what if her abilities could help others? What if this knowledge could be preserved, the way your mother preserved it for Emma?" Emma herself, who had been quietly listening as always, spoke up from her perch on the garden wall. "Grandma Rose said the knowing dies when it's not shared." She looked directly at her mother. "She wanted me to teach others, Mom, not just help the triplets." Rebecca felt the weight of her mother's legacy pressing on her shoulders, the traditional healing knowledge she herself had never fully embraced, but that lived on in her daughter. "We'll think about it," she conceded finally. "But Emma's well-being comes first. No laboratories, no researchers, no turning her into a specimen." Thomas and Olivia readily agreed, and as night fell over Brooklyn, the unlikely family unit continued their conversation under the stars. planning a future that honored both scientific advancement and ancient wisdom, modern medicine and mountain magic, the wealth of the Parkers and the heritage of the Johnsons. Above them in their rooms, 4 children slept peacefully. 3 infants whose dramatic entry into the world had forged unexpected bonds, and 1 extraordinary girl who somehow bridged worlds that should never have connected. 10 months after the triplets' birth, a letter arrived that shattered the harmonious rhythm the 2 families had established. Rebecca stared at the return address, her hands trembling so violently that Emma noticed from across their kitchen. "Mom? What's wrong?" Rebecca quickly tucked the envelope into her pocket. "Nothing, sweetie, just work stuff." But Emma, with her uncanny perception, wasn't fooled. "It's from Dad, isn't it?" Rebecca sighed. David Johnson had abandoned them 3 years earlier, walking out with vague promises to find himself and sporadic communication that eventually dwindled to nothing. No child support, no birthday calls, nothing. Until now, apparently. "Yes," she admitted. "But it doesn't matter. We're doing fine without him." Later that evening, after Emma was asleep, Rebecca finally opened the letter. David had returned to New York and wanted to reconnect with Emma. He'd gotten his act together and was ready to be a father again. Most troublingly, he'd somehow learned about their connection to the wealthy Parker family and mentioned his concerns about Emma's living situation. Rebecca knew what that meant. David had always been opportunistic, and the Parkers represented opportunity. The next day, Rebecca confided in Olivia while they watched the triplets playing on a blanket in the garden, Emma supervising with her usual gentle authority. "He has parental rights," Rebecca admitted, "and I'm worried about what he might do if he feels excluded from Emma's life." Olivia's expression hardened. She had become fiercely protective of both Rebecca and Emma. "Thomas has excellent lawyers," she began, but Rebecca shook her head. "I don't want legal battles. Emma has been through enough." She watched her daughter demonstrating her flashlight technique to entranced triplets. "But I also don't want David disrupting everything we've built here." They agreed Rebecca should meet with David alone first, assessing his intentions before involving Emma. The meeting occurred at a coffee shop in neutral territory. David looked older, more worn than Rebecca remembered, though he'd made an effort with new clothes and a haircut. "You look good, Becca," he said, after awkward greetings. "Really good." Rebecca didn't waste time on pleasantries. "What do you want, David?" He had the grace to look embarrassed. "To see my daughter, to make amends. For disappearing for 3 years, for missing her birthdays, her school plays, her—" Rebecca stopped herself, unwilling to mention Emma's special abilities. David stared into his coffee. "I know I messed up, but I'm stable now, got a job in construction, an apartment in Queens. And your sudden interest has nothing to do with the Parkers?" His expression confirmed her suspicions before he could deny it. "I heard things," he admitted, "about Emma spending time with some rich family, about you living in a fancy brownstone." "We have our own apartment," Rebecca clarified coldly. "I have a legitimate job with Parker Technologies." David leaned forward. "And Emma? What exactly does she do for these people? Why are they so interested in a 9-year-old girl?" The implication made Rebecca's blood boil. "The Parkers are good people who have become like family to us." "They're not her family," David snapped. "I am." The conversation deteriorated from there. David made thinly veiled threats about custody rights, about investigating Emma's situation with the Parkers, about what a judge might think of such an unusual arrangement. Rebecca returned to the brownstone shaken. That evening, an emergency council convened in the Parkers' living room after all children were asleep. "He's just looking for money," Thomas concluded after hearing Rebecca's account. "We can handle this." Rebecca shook her head. "It's not that simple. He's still her father. And Emma, she still asks about him sometimes." "What does Emma want?" Olivia asked the question they'd all been avoiding. The answer came unexpectedly from the doorway. "I want to see him," Emma said quietly, having apparently overheard everything. "But I want him to know I have two families now." The adults exchanged glances, recognizing the wisdom in her approach. Emma had always possessed an emotional intelligence that defied her years. "And if he tries to take you away?" Rebecca asked, giving voice to her deepest fear. Emma approached her mother, taking her hands with surprising strength. "He won't succeed," she said with absolute certainty. "The babies won't let that happen. They need me here." It was such an Emma thing to say, mystical yet matter-of-fact, that despite the gravity of the situation, everyone smiled. "Well," Thomas said, "I suppose we're arranging a family meeting then." David Johnson stood awkwardly in the garden of the Brooklyn brownstone, clearly intimidated by its grandeur, despite efforts to appear unaffected. His eyes widened further when Emma emerged from the small house, as the Johnsons' apartment had come to be called, and ran not to him but to the triplets playing on a blanket under Olivia's supervision. "Hi, Dad," she said after greeting each baby with her special touches. "You've been gone a long time." David flinched at her directness. "I know, Emmy, I'm sorry." Rebecca watched from the sidelines, anxiety churning in her stomach. Thomas stood beside her, a silent pillar of support. "These are my other family," Emma continued, gesturing to the Parkers and the triplets. "This is Michael, Lily, and Rosie. I help take care of them." David's expression shifted between confusion and calculation as he observed the scene. The wealthy Parkers, his ex-wife now dressed in clearly expensive clothes, his daughter moving with complete confidence between two worlds. "Mr. Johnson," Thomas stepped forward with professional courtesy, extending his hand. "I understand you have questions about our arrangement." The afternoon unfolded in unexpected ways. David had clearly come with ulterior motives, financial opportunities, possibly even custody threats, but found himself disarmed by the genuine bonds evident between Emma and the triplets. Each time he attempted to steer conversation toward compensation or concerns about Emma's involvement, the little girl herself redirected with innocent observations that revealed the depth of her attachment. "Rosie needs her medicine soon," she announced during an awkward pause. "She breathes better after we do the mountain song." David watched in astonishment as his daughter performed the ritual Rebecca had described. The flashlight patterns, the humming, the gentle touches that visibly calmed the smallest triplet. "Where did she learn this?" he asked Rebecca quietly. "From my mother. The gift runs in the family." Something in David's expression shifted, recognition, perhaps, of dimensions to his daughter he'd never bothered to explore. Later, when Emma took the triplets inside with Olivia for their nap routine, the three adults sat at the garden table for a frank discussion. "I'll be direct," Thomas began. "Emma has become essential to our family. She has a gift for helping the triplets, especially Rosie, whose health remains fragile. So you're using my daughter as some kind of, what, faith healer for your kids?" David's defensive tone couldn't quite mask his confusion. Rebecca intervened. "Emma does what she chooses to do, David. She loves these children. And the Parkers have given her opportunities we could never provide. Education, stability, a chance to develop her abilities." "And what do you get out of this arrangement?" David directed the question at Thomas, revealing his transactional worldview. Thomas met his gaze steadily. "Family, community. A perspective on life my wealth nearly blinded me to. Your daughter has extraordinary gifts beyond what she does for the triplets. She bridges worlds that rarely intersect, teaching all of us what really matters." David's skepticism remained visible, but something else flickered in his expression, perhaps recognition that the situation was more complex than he'd anticipated. "I want to be part of Emma's life," he said finally. "I've made mistakes, But she's still my daughter. Rebecca tensed, but Thomas spoke first. No one is suggesting otherwise. Emma should have relationships with everyone who loves her. The question is whether you're here for her or for what you think you can get from this situation. The directness of the question hung in the garden air, punctuated by distant city sounds and the occasional burst of childish laughter from inside. David stared at his hands. "I don't know," he admitted with surprising honesty. "Both, probably. I'm not a good person like you all seem to be." The raw admission created a shift in the conversation's energy. For the first time, Rebecca glimpsed the man she'd once loved, flawed but capable of truth when cornered. "Then start with just being her father," she suggested quietly. "Sunday visits, school events, build trust before anything else." After David left, promising to return the following weekend, Rebecca and Thomas remained in the garden as evening approached. "Do you think he'll cause problems?" Thomas asked. Rebecca watched fireflies beginning to glow in the garden dusk. "I don't know, but Emma wants him in her life, and denying that would cause more harm than good." Thomas nodded. "We'll adjust. Our unusual family has always been about adaptation." Inside, Emma was explaining something important to the triplets, her expression serious as she moved from crib to crib with her flashlight. Though no one could hear her words, the certainty in her movements suggested she was, as always, preparing them for changes to come, her instinctive wisdom once again guiding their interconnected lives through yet another evolution. 5 years passed, marked by seasons and milestones, challenges and triumphs. The brownstone gardens had grown lush with perennials planted by all members of the extended family. Even David, who had gradually found his place as Emma's weekend father and, eventually, a reliable presence at special events. Today, the garden bloomed with decorations celebrating the triplets' 5th birthday. Balloons danced in the summer breeze as Michael raced around with boundless energy. Lily organized the younger children into elaborate games of her own invention. And Rosie sat quietly with Emma, now 14, their heads bent together in familiar communion. "Still doing the flashlight thing?" David asked Rebecca as they arranged presents on the designated table. Rebecca smiled. "Some traditions don't fade, even with time." Thomas approached with a tray of drinks. "The foundation board approved Emma's special project," he announced. "Full funding for the summer program." The Gifted Hands Foundation had grown from conversations that began years ago in this very garden, an organization dedicated to identifying children with healing abilities similar to Emma's and providing them with both scientific education and cultural context for their gifts. Emma, despite her youth, had become its heart and vision. 14 years old and already changing the world, David remarked with genuine pride. In the years since his return, he'd slowly earned trust by keeping promises and respecting boundaries, eventually finding meaningful work within Parker Technologies' Community Outreach Division. Olivia emerged from the house carrying Rosie's medication, still required occasionally, though the child's health had stabilized beyond all medical expectations. She paused to watch Emma demonstrating something to Rosie with the same dollar store flashlight, now held together with tape but steadfastly preserved. "Some things never change," she murmured to Rebecca, who had joined her. "And some things change entirely," Rebecca replied, looking meaningfully around the garden, filled with friends and family from both their worlds. Rebecca's nursing colleagues alongside Thomas's executive team, Emma's school friends mingling with children from the Parker Technologies Family Center. The birthday celebration proceeded with joyful chaos, cake, presents, games, and finally, as evening approached, the special tradition that had evolved over years. Emma gathered everyone in a circle, triplets at the center, and began the story they all knew but never tired of hearing. "Once upon a time in Central Park," she began, "a little girl with a flashlight met a lady whose babies were trying to tell her something important." As twilight descended and fairy lights illuminated the garden, Emma's voice carried the familiar tale, embellished now with 5 years of subsequent adventures, while her flashlight traced patterns that still seemed to hold magic, even to the adults who had witnessed its effects countless times. Later, after guests departed and younger children were tucked into bed, the core family, Thomas and Olivia, Rebecca and Emma, and the triplets allowed to stay up late for their birthday, gathered in the garden one last time. "I have an announcement," Emma said with unusual formality. "I've decided what I want to do when I grow up." The adults exchanged amused glances. Emma's career plans changed regularly, from doctor to teacher to scientist. "I'm going to combine medicine and Grandma Rose's healing," she declared. "Dr. Chen is going to help me design experiments to prove that some of the mountain techniques really work." No one expressed surprise. Emma had been moving in this direction for years, her unique position between worlds, giving her perspective few others could claim. "And the triplets are going to help," she added, as Rosie nodded solemnly beside her. Of the three, Rosie remained most closely connected to Emma, their bond transcending explanation. "How exactly will they help?" Thomas asked, genuinely curious. Emma and Rosie exchanged a look before Emma answered. "Rosie can feel things too, not like me, but similar. She's starting to learn." This revelation silenced the adults. They'd suspected, observed moments of unusual perception, but hearing it confirmed still sent a ripple of wonder through the garden. "The circle continues," Rebecca murmured, thinking of her mother. As stars appeared above their Brooklyn sanctuary, the unlikely family sat together in contemplative silence, marveling at the journey that had brought them here, from a chance encounter in Central Park to an unconventional family structure that had enriched all their lives immeasurably. Emma's flashlight traced one final pattern in the darkness, a symbol that seemed to encompass everything, past and future, science and mystery, separate worlds now permanently intertwined. "Do you think we would have found each other without the triplets?" Olivia asked softly. Emma answered before anyone else could. "We were always meant to find each other," she said with the simple certainty that had guided them all for 5 years. "The babies just helped us realize it sooner." And as moonlight silvered the garden where two families had become one, no one could find reason to doubt her.